Ready to go? Perfect. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Kind of excited about what we got going. We have a vertical of Clos de Betz, which Betz family winery has been making since 1997. And because it's so special, we were able to convince Mr. Bob Betz over here to come in and join us to taste this flight. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. 15, everyone's big dog on the block, but it wasn't predictable. It didn't roll out in some generous fashion, some predictable fashion. It was, Lewis describes the 2015 harvest as the roller coaster of our vintages, and you described the heat craziness of the vintage.
Sure. Well, 2014 was my first vintage back at Betz, and it was just, the season started early, we had a lot of heat, but it was just steady. Like it was just a warm season from start to finish, a very compressed harvest, and it was almost predictable. We saw that the grapes were ripening quick, and so we were out there frequently. 2015 was kind of different. It was more of a, I guess the heat accumulation, like Bob was saying, it's not just about total heat accumulation, but the distribution. So we were kind of, it was cyclical, you could say. So we were kind of going through these 2-week periods where we'd fall down to maybe a daytime temperature in the 70s, and then over a couple of weeks we'd build up and get into the high 90s. And so we were kind of seeing a lot of that, particularly during the mid part of the season. Harvest was particularly challenging. I think it challenged us in many different ways. We knew by that point in time that these warmer vintages, particularly kind of the earlier picked stuff in 13, certainly in 14, that we wanted to be, I guess, from a ripeness level, flavor level, we wanted to be a little closer to an early pick than a late pick. And 15 challenged us. 2014, I think our first pick in 2014 with Merlot off of Red Mountain was, I want to say, September 3. 15, we were trying to make the best decision we could. We said we knew these grapes were ripening fast. I think we picked, what, the 26th of August?
26th of August.
So we were already pulling lots off, and that last week of August, we were pulling Merlot off, and we are very glad we did, because we're very happy with kind of the direction that this wine has taken, the fruit intensity that it's had. We saw maybe a lot of other people around us kind of hang, and I don't know that they preserved the freshness quite as much as the people that picked a little earlier that year, maybe. Yeah. And so I'm glad. It was definitely out of our comfort zone to be picking Merlot in August. I'm glad that we did, because still, this 2015, it has the red fruits, the dark fruits, the texture. It has a lot of freshness there. It has acidity, it has freshness. I'm really pleased with where this wine is right now.
I never thought we would harvest grapes in Washington, red grapes like this, red grapes of dimension, in August. It was just not in my lexicon at all. These early vintages, I mean, we had harvest dates of Halloween, okay? So I never thought we'd harvest anything in August. And in fact, we needed to. We needed to get this off the vine. In this effort to avoid that compote, jammy, kind of stewed fruit sort of notion, we needed to get this off, and we did. As a result, I think we have perhaps the most powerful wine on the table with the 15, but it didn't go overboard in terms of its fruit ripeness. We maintained that depth of black cherry, depth of a little bit of blackberry coming out in it, a little bit of this earth, compost, if I can use that word. It means something to me, okay? And you still get this vitality to it. A little bit of dried herbs like thyme and maybe some bay leaf in there, but I'm pleased that Lewis jumped on it as fast as he did, getting these grapes off the vine. And it's what makes winemaking so fun, so challenging, and that is reading every vintage for what it's worth. You follow and you track what's going on a daily, on a weekly, on a seasonal basis. And you make decisions without formula, without recipe, without some printed out sheet that tells you what to do. You do it based on what Mother Nature gives you, okay? Bravo.
Yes.
Well done.
2016. So I want to talk about this one for a minute. I'm going to start here. 2016, I think it highlights what, again, I'm going back to what Bob said about the total heat accumulation and the distribution kind of have different effects. So if you look at 2016 on paper. I don't have it in front of me, but the heat accumulation for total growing degree days,
I don't think I have
it was very similar to the vintages on either side, but I think that's misleading, if you will. And again, I'm going to go back once again and talk about that French saying, which is August makes the must. And like I say, I think in the New World, September makes the must. 2016, I remember May was so warm. The first days of June, several reports came out, and we were kind of sharing them in the local wine community, and Bob and Steve and myself, saying that we had broken pretty much every record in the vineyard that we could, like daytime highs, nighttime highs, total heat accumulation. We really had a lot of heat even before May, but by the time we get to June, we were kind of looking at the vintage, what we had so far, how early the bud break was, and how much shoot growth we had. We were like, wow, we could be in for a really big, really warm early vintage. But the vintage ended up being almost front-loaded. We had more heat accumulation in the early part of the season. The mid-season was started by the time you get to like June and July. We're tracking a little, for heat accumulation, we're tracking closer to 2012, which we like to say is perfectly boring to talk about because it was just
Perfectly average.
Perfectly average, which is also boring to talk about because 2012 was just, it just clicked every box. But so what I'm getting to is that final ripening period in 2016 in September and October. It was very cool. The skins were actually very thin, and because of that, whether you're talking about Clos de Betz, Père de Famille, Heart of the Hill, the wines just have a textural attractiveness to them. They're so generous right now, so round. I love that about them.
They are round in the 16s, but this wine, unlike what we've come to with all these prior vintages, this wine still is the babe, okay? It's the youthful wine where as I stick my nose in this, I get these individual components, blueberries and plum and spring flowers and those primary aromas that you get out of grapes. And it's more components. It hasn't done this knitting, this mélange that the earlier vintage has. But that being said, it's all there, and that's what's exciting. It's not just a component. You know where these components are going to lead this wine.
The range of fruit aromas and spice aromas, I think, it is intense. It's plum, it's cherry, it's blackberry, it's red currant, it's black currant. The oak inflection, like the vanilla tones to it. I like you said, there's so many different kind of pieces to the aromatics and the flavors in this wine. Yeah. They haven't quite, they haven't become one like maybe the 2012 or even the 2010, where like the flavors and aromas have all kind of become one. Like you said, they're like single points. You can still pick out the single spice aromas, the fruit aromas.
And you get that exuberance on the palate as well. You get this I'm just this vigorous youth that wants to just do so much and just watch me as I grow. So we will.
Indeed.
And then the 17 is even a year younger.
The 17 is the current release.
And this is very sexy. I never use that word with wine. I'm sorry. I just never, but it's seductive. That's a better term. It's seductive wine. Listen to it sing to you, yes. But it has more, it has fewer individual components and more integration than the 16 does. I'm surprised.
It is, it's a very powerful wine. And again, it's still a baby, but texturally and weight-wise, I think, it's in that same ballpark with maybe the 2007, the 2012. I can almost see a resemblance in the 2012, remembering back when we were tasting it right after bottling with the 2017. It's got the herbal tones, the spice tones. It almost has some white pepper coming out of it right now.
Absolutely. This is Grand Cru Saint-Emilion to me.
Oh, wow.
I'm, it's easy to say. I mean, hopefully it does in your glass too. But as I taste this, I get Washington, and I get Washington out of this. But to me, this has more French influence in terms of its fruit definition and its current structure that I could only, if I were blind tasting this thing, I'd put it as Grand Cru Saint-Emilion.
Okay. Well, the vintage conditions were challenging. 2017 was a challenge. We had a cold winter. The 2016-17 winter was cold, and because of that, we had a very late start to bud break and a really late start to the season. So we kind of knew from the get-go that it was probably going to be a late season. If you talk to vineyard managers, winemakers that have been doing it a long time, you can usually look at a vintage and say, if you have an early bud break, meaning if you start early, you're going to finish early. If you have a late bud break, if you start late, you're going to finish late. So we kind of already went into 2017 knowing that it was going to be a late season. We actually had a bit lower of a crop load, just naturally lower, smaller berry weights, fewer berries, smaller cluster size. And we ended up actually going out, in 2017, I think we made it all the way out into, for Merlot, the third week of September, which for us is pretty late. And the reason why we had that, we actually had some heat mid-season. We actually had some, and because we've had a lot of questions about this, so I want to talk about it a little bit.
I think it's worth addressing.
We had some fires in 2017 to the north and to the south of us. So in British Columbia, we had some wildfires burning there. Of course, California had all kinds of wildfires that they had to deal with in 2017. But we also had one in Washington, down in the Columbia Gorge. So lucky for us, we're mostly in the Yakima Valley, we were actually quite a ways away from any of those. We did get smoke up in a higher elevation layer, and what that did is it moderated the high temperatures and the light intensity that we had, or that we experienced during the season, and it actually it buffered those, and it kind of controlled the high temperatures, and it kind of extended our season out. I think we really realized by maybe the second week of September that we were running quite a bit behind from maybe a more traditional season or a more classic season like 2012. And so we had a long season and small berries, and so it's a very concentrated wine.
Concentrated and complex already. I'm quite surprised that this wine, which is 2.5 years old, okay, that's what it is right now because of the September harvest on this thing. Mm-hmm. All sorts of nuance already coming out aromatically on this wine. Very exciting vintage.
Indeed.
Yeah, very exciting. Okay, so which one would you drink tonight?
Oh, which one would I drink tonight? That's a good question.
Yeah, little ribeye steak.
You know, I am a Francophile, so like right now, if you're asking me today, the 11 is so attractive aromatically right now, it would be a toss-up. Maybe the 11 or the 7 are so attractive right now if I was going to be having it with steak, something off the barbecue. Yep. If you have something maybe a little lighter that didn't need quite so much power, boy, the 2010 is silky right now. The 13 is very hedonistic. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about vintages I would drink right now, that's probably where I'd be. What about you?
Okay, I go back to the 12 just mm-hmm. because of its overall structure, contribution, and expression, overall expression. I go to the 7. Lighters, I'd go to the 8 and 10. For power, for sheer hedonism, I'd go to the 15 and the 17 because I would drink that wine tonight.
I would too.
I love the 17.
I actually do quite frequently.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us during this vertical tasting experience with our founder, Bob Betz, and winemaker, Lewis Skinner. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or visit our website to learn more about the team and the wines we make here at Betz Family Winery.